Hi guys, welcome to class. We're going to talk about Southeast Asia today. I'm kind of sad that we're kind of relegating this whole part of the world to a class on your own. We're not going to have a chance to talk about it, but it just works out better this way. We got a chance to talk about China together, and so that's how we'll do this. So Southeast Asia, if you remember right, and from the monsoon class on your own from last week, it's a very wet area. And that's good and bad, right? We know that water will help us grow food, but too much water will make it hard. And so there are parts of Southeast Asia that have pretty high populations, but other parts that are fairly sparsely populated. Um, what I want to do today is I want to talk about, first of all, before we do that, do you know what this is right here? This is Angkor Wat. It's in Cambodia. You might want to look that up. It's just kind of a cool little place that's got a lot of historical significance. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Southeast Asia by essentially focusing in on two specific areas, and we're going to kind of compare and contrast these. They have very different sort of trajectories. This down here we're going to start with, it's called the growth triangle, or at least that's what we're going to call it, the growth triangle. And that's going to be centered around the nation/city of Singapore, but you'll note that it includes little chunks of Malaysia, chunks of Indonesia, and there's islands in here. And then the second thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about this right here. And unfortunately, it's going to be a little confusing because when we talked in Europe, we had this thing called the Golden Triangle, and it was the part of Europe that it was just the most developed, had the most sort of money, that kind of stuff, almost the center of the world. What we mean by Golden Triangle here is something very different. This was the Golden Triangle here is all about opium, and opium is all about heroin. So that's what we're going to talk about this area, and then first we're going to talk about the Growth Triangle. So the Growth Triangle is really what we mean is Singapore, and then the tip of the Malay Peninsula. Again, it's also going to include those parts of Indonesia. So this is the question I want to ask you guys. I'm going to go back to the map here in a second, and I want you to tell me geographically, why is this point significant? So take a look at the map. What is it about Singapore that's significant? So if we could back this map out a little bit, what we'd see is Indonesia down in this area and kind of going all the way down and around. Essentially, if you are moving goods by boat from this area, which includes China, Japan, if we go way over there, the United States, to this area, Indian Ocean, which is going to include India, it's going to include Africa. If you're going from China, it's going to be how you get to Europe. So in other words, if you're going from this main area to this main area, the best route is right through there. And it has been, this is the Strait of Malacca. It has been for centuries that that's been the case. And you've got to squeeze through this sort of thing. A squeeze is not the right thing, but the idea here being essentially whoever basically is there at Singapore has a pretty good, location in terms of there's a lot of traffic going by both ways. So it becomes a pretty good sort of port stopping point, midway point, whatever you want to call it. And so this area has been fairly significant for a long time. 77% of the people in Singapore are Chinese ethnicity. This is what we call diaspora, where essentially a group of people, the Chinese, for example, out in the world, outside of China. That's a diaspora. We'll sometimes talk about the Jewish diaspora, Jewish people all over the world, not located in Israel. So they are Singaporean, but they're mostly Chinese ethnicity in this area. The economic importance of this area, there's really two big things we want to talk about. We're going to talk about more here in a second, but two pretty essential things that have been the case. Number one is going to be, it's an industrial center. A lot of stuff is made there, but it's also one of the largest container ports in the world. You're going to watch a video here in just a second about what containers are, but I just want to point this out very quickly before we move on from it. The idea of container, you're going to watch that video, you're going to say, oh, a box, big deal. The whole thing about globalization that we have today is really driven by these things called containers. this sort of standardization that we're all just going to put stuff into this box that's all roughly the same size, which means our ships don't have to fit different things. All they got to do is how many of these containers can I fit on these ships. Every port, as long as they have the same standardized thing that will grab the same standardized thing, it's all good. And that actually, the use of containers speeds up global trade to the point where I can build stuff in China and have it shipped over to the United States, and the cost is relatively negligible because it's so cheap to do it this way. So that's going to be a main thing, is this industrial center container port. You're going to watch a video on that in a second. The other thing that's important in this area is oil refinement. There's a lot of oil down here in Southeast Asia, and Singapore is one of the main places where that oil is refined, where they take the crude oil and turn it into something that is more usable, and that's going to be a big part of this. All right, go watch a video on containers, and then we'll come back and talk more about Singapore.